Right, back live tonight here on In Focus. The Umkhonto Party is dragging the national broadcaster, or the public broadcaster, if you like, to court over the use of the term government of national unity. It instead claims the current agreement at national level is a coalition between the ANC and the Democratic Alliance. This after no party secured a majority in the May vote. Media Monitoring Africa Director William Bird joins us now for more on this. William, good to have you. Thank you very much for your time. You would think this would be a thing that would happen between political parties and they can, I suppose, contest for that space of whether it's a GNU or a broad coalition and so on and so forth. But the media seemingly being brought into this environment. Does this really spell for us or indicative of the new media environment in which, of course, broadcasters would need to operate, sometimes in unanticipated ways?
Well, I think what it's indicative of is an effort to influence the editorial direction of the SABC. So the complaint is lodged against or at least the case is lodged against the SABC, and it's quite perplexing for a number of reasons. The first is that if there's a complaint against the SABC in terms of the content that they put out and the terms that they use, you would have expected that they would have followed normal process, which is you complain to the broadcaster, and then you go to the Broadcast Complaints Commission. And if you're still not happy, you can then take it to the regulator, ICASA. And in this instance, they've opted to go straight to the High Court. So it's very bizarre as to why they've chosen this route. But what it does suggest is that media is not going to be outside of what they perceive as a fair target in order to achieve whatever political goals they're seeking to achieve. And I think this is where we are in the current environment, that people that stand up for rights and that stand up for editorial independence and democracy can expect to be attacked just for doing so.
Does that, represent, for example, the media space now becoming the terrain wherein political prominence is contested?
Yeah, I think so. Often these things are done in order to try and influence, how the media would cover them or seek to cover them. So you see historically in South Africa, political parties complain about the media coverage they get, not necessarily because they have a legitimate concern about that, but because they're trying to influence whoever the different broadcast or media is in order to try and persuade them to give them more coverage. So it's often a kind of a tactic of complaining about things in order to try and highlight and try and direct and drive an alternative political narrative. So it's kind of using that attack method and that form of complaint in order to drive a very different agenda. So it's not really about the SABC using the term GNU. It's very much more about the party seeking to try and influence the SABC in order to make them more aware and more conscious of how they choose to cover and report on the MK party in this instance.
And how should the media then, the SABC itself, maybe other mediums as well, respond, engage with these type of politics, one, but two, how do citizens then engage with those type of politics? Because you'd see then the response, for example, on social media would be how then the broadcaster responds to this will have some kind of backlash, if you like, in some instances, or acceptance.
Yeah, I think that, what you're seeing is an increasingly polarized kind of set of views where people and media are then attacked for merely doing the right things. I think the first thing is for news organizations, they've got to stick to their guns. They do their job to the best of their ability. They abide by the Broadcast Complaints Commission code. They abide by the code of the Press Council as well, if they also signatories to that. And they try and, carry out the most ethical, professional journalism that they can. If they fall foul of that, they must act accordingly, correct their mistakes, change systems where they need to be changed and moved on. But they can't back down because people are going around and attacking them. If anything, it's a sign that they're doing the right thing. In addition to that, though, what they then need to also be doing is highlighting to the public the difference between sticking up for democracy and for human rights and human rights values and merely giving in to what people are arguing against them. And they need to challenge and take people on if they make, unsubstantiated remarks that undermine media freedom or undermine rights. They need to be challenged on those. I think it's going to be increasingly tough and difficult for journalists to do their job, and we need that. That's why we need, state bodies and Chapter 9 institutions to also be standing up for media freedom, and other political parties to slam, various other entities if they choose to attack media where it's completely unmerited.
So the substantiation component of this, I suppose, is what's going to be argued also in the courts, especially if you read the latest statement from the MK party saying, well, the utterances by Helen Zille certainly go to support or substantiate their claim that this is not a government of national unity. How do you respond to that unpredictability, I suppose, also in terms of how political leaders are communicating?
I mean, look, if you had to take politicians at face value on everything that they said, it would be a very difficult world in which to know if it's Monday or Friday, because they all change their arguments. What is true is that, certainly in Parliament, former Justice John Hlophe has been using the term GNU. So you could easily say that, their own head of party in Parliament has been using the term GNU repeatedly in the way that he refers to the government. So you could then say, well, that completely undermines and defeats their legal case. So when you start to get into that thing, it really does then show that you are meeting their goals, which is to make sure that you're talking about this idea of is it or isn't it a GNU, and whether or not it's actually inclusive and whether it meets those definitions. Whereas, in fact, the real issue here is that they're saying we're going to court in order to compel the SABC to try and alter the way that it covers things instead of following the processes that are set out. They didn't lodge a complaint with the SABC. They didn't lodge a complaint with the Broadcast Commission of South Africa. Why not? Why haven't they followed that? In their legal papers, they don't make out any reason or any case as to why they didn't follow the normal process, yet they're launching this on an urgent basis. If you've got an urgent appeal, an urgent case, go to the Broadcast Complaints Commission. These things can be dealt with in a far more speedy and more cost-effective manner than it is by going to court. So again, the question is what are you seeking to gain by going to court, as opposed to using the processes that are well established and tried and tested and shown to be effective? So the question there is why, and that's where we need to make sure that we continue to go back to the question of why are they following this process and what are they seeking really to gain. Whether it is a GNU or not isn't really of concern in this particular matter, because the real issue is why haven't they followed a normal process?
It's of course unfolding in the public broadcaster space. Do you see it confining itself to that space, or even independent media becoming affected by this?
So I think other media, including Newzroom Afrika, may well be subjected and targeted, depending on whatever way the wind is blowing. I think the public broadcasters, fair game. They're one of the they are the biggest broadcaster in the country. So for them to be targeting them and saying, as the public broadcaster, you have this, you can understand why they're doing it, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be the only one that will be targeted by political parties seeking to do exactly what MK in this instance is doing. You attack the media in order to try and leverage and gain traction of whatever political idea it is that you're actually wanting to get on the media's agenda. So as I said, that isn't the issue. The real issue is what political game are they seeking to play, and why aren't they following due process? When you ask them why they're not following the standard process, that starts to expose what the game is that they are seeking to play in this instance. In this instance, it's MK party. We've seen political parties do this the world over. We've seen it occurring in the UK recently in the lead up to these particular riots, where you've seen right-wing media, right-wing characters doing these sorts of things, attacking certain media, attacking, in that instance, the BBC. So this isn't a unique thing to South Africa, but it is an important element of a new form of a playbook of how to try and influence media and shift narratives for a particular political gain. And it's using, and in fact it constitutes, I would argue, an abuse of the legal process, because you're not using the standard processes that are well established and tried and tested. They're forcing the SABC to go to court on this when in fact this shouldn't be something that the SABC should actually having to be going and answering for, because they should just be before the BCCSA like any other normal complaint.
William Bird, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming
Thank
on
you.
This evening. Media Monitoring Africa's director there, William Bird.